It's nice to be here in this group, and we're going to be talking not about women's issues, but still. This is a really important panel because career paths are one of the most critical part is thinking about how to do it correctly, how to correctly figure out your career and where to move. So this is a fantastic panel to talk about this, and we're going to talk about a range of issues, and then at the end, I think we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes of questions from people in the audience, because I think you guys have smarter questions of where to go from these very incredible women. So let's just start. I want you guys to introduce yourselves, and then we'll start off. So very briefly.
Jennifer Chase. I run a couple of labs for Microsoft, and I do research on networks, which hopefully a lot of you heard about this morning. And I moved from academia to industry, so I've had both sides of the career path.
I'm Alexandra Korolova. I'm now an assistant professor of computer science at USC, and I do research on data privacy, which is the flip side of big data and data science. And I did the switch from industry to academia. I was a research scientist at Google before.
I'm Shubha Nabar. I'm a data scientist at Salesforce, working on Salesforce IQ. Before this, I worked at a bunch of large companies like Microsoft and LinkedIn. And prior to that, I got my PhD from Stanford in 2008.
So I'm Bing from Berkeley. I'm professor of statistics, also have a 0% with ECS. And I started with theory, information theory, and empirical process, and moved to signal processing, MCMC, and then found machine learning and high-dimensional statistics and engaged in intermediate research. I was at Bell Lab for 2 years after tenure, so I have some industry experience in a research lab, and then returned to Berkeley 15 years ago. I've been doing genomics and neuroscience and machine learning and high-dimensional statistics.
Great, fantastic. So I think let's start with talk about that sort of academic business move back and forth. Why don't each of you talk about that a little bit, about what the pros and cons of that are, because that's typically the movement, or if there's other choices. I think it's pretty close to the choices. So
for me, I was a postdoc for 4 years, a professor for 10, 12 years. And I liked being a professor. I liked teaching. But I felt like there were many things that I wanted to do, bringing together different kinds of sciences, which I talked about a little bit this morning, that I couldn't do at a university because it was too siloed. So I think the advantage, and I've been at Microsoft for 18 years now, and the advantage of a corporate lab for me is that I get to learn about all of the new problems when they're really cutting edge problems, and I love taking those and trying to make those into academic problems that then other people can work on. And I also feel I'm really lucky because during my years at Microsoft, I've been able to work with probably 200 to 300 graduate students and postdocs anyway, which is, you know, the really wonderful part of being a professor. So I feel I've had the best of both worlds.
But there's not many companies like Microsoft, Google.
There
there's only
are
a
not
few.
that many like that. And so I think there is somewhat of a trade-off with how structured your research is, how much it's self-directed versus directed by the company. But as I was saying to some women at lunch, you know, it's not like being a professor. You have complete freedom just because your time gets very structured. So I think it's just a matter of maximizing your impact within whatever the constraints are of the position that you have. I mean, that's what we want to have. We want to have impact. And it's, you know, how do I maximize my impact within the constraints?
So for me, as I was finishing my PhD at Stanford, I thought, well, I really understand everything there is about data privacy, and I don't understand why industry is not implementing all the theories that we have developed.
Because you're a genius, right? Sorry.
No, not we, but
yes,
you know, the general we, the academic community in privacy. So my goal is going to Google was to kind of understand what are the challenges, why can't we just apply this in practice? And kind of like what Jennifer said, being in industry really puts you at the frontier, the cutting edge. You get to see what are the real problems that are being addressed. And you also get to see where's the gap between what academics know how to solve and what industry needs.
Why did you move back?
I moved back for 2 reasons. One is I felt that I understood where the gaps are and where more research is needed to bridge the gaps. And secondly, I had a couple of summer interns who I really enjoyed working with at Google, and that was one of the best parts of working there. So that was a ring that maybe I should be back in academia advising students. So longer term research plus the student advising.
Yeah, so when, I think one of the advantages that academics have is that they get abstract out, they get inspired by real world problems, but then they get abstracted out into this neat theoretical framework and come up with like theoretical guarantees for their solutions. But you don't have that kind of freedom necessarily in industry. You have to deal with the mess. But at the same time, you have this, you have the pleasure of seeing your products deployed and affecting the lives of millions. And for me, that was a big pull. And yeah, I'd say that I'm pretty happy with my decision to move into industry.
Good.
So for me, it was like I started having family, and I thought maybe the Bell Labs is kind of research-like, might give me more flexibility to raise kids. So I did have, it was good the first time. Also, my daughter was 5 months old, so I could go feed her every lunchtime because she wouldn't take a bottle. So, so it did give me 2-year flexibility, but Bell Lab at the time was going down. So when I went there, the first year was really good.
Okay.
And we're hiring the second year, they're closing down the library. So the writing on the wall was very clear. And I also miss students. I miss the illusion being young always. Because I start seeing that corridor going to lunch with the same people and getting gray hair. I mean, you still get gray hair, but at least you look at other people, they're all young. So that's really important. And just a new group of people, and also I miss the social science aspect of university.
So talk about sort of when you're thinking of your career, you're talking about taking time for your kids or stuff like that. Talk about what the most important moments in the trajectory of your career, think something you did that was important. Why don't we start with you, Ben, this idea of where you moved to a place that was how you sort of, I call it strategery around your career. How did you strategize around that?
I don't strategize a lot.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
I
you just go from thing to thing.
I follow my
trying to look
instinct.
Okay.
And somehow it worked out. And also, I mean, Bell Lab is a wonderful place, and the way they approach problems, and that's where I got on, like speech coding and internet network tomography. Just things in the air. People collaborate without walls. Even there are departments, but people really work cross departments. And that Bell Lab spirit, I think, it's really amazing.
So the first job was that was your first job?
No, I was already, I got tenure at Berkeley. I mean, the hidden story was also I had, not so smooth tenure. And eventually I got it, and then my Bell Lab friend reached out to me and said, why don't you just come? And I said, yeah, right, let's try something new. So that was also the hidden story, why I decided to. They tried to recruit me earlier, I was not interested, but then even I got tenure, I decided to see what's like outside. That was really good. It was really good for me.
Would you go back to a corporate environment or?
Maybe not the next 5 years, I have things to do. But 10 years from now, who knows? So I'm open.
Shubha?
I guess I haven't been strategizing either about how to get my career to places, but I've just been very lucky to be at the right place at the right time often. So when I was at Microsoft, there was a new lab that was being formed here whose goal was to work with all the different social networks that we get, Facebook and Twitter, and incorporate them in people's searches, incorporate results from that in people's search results. And So I got to play with some very interesting data, and it was a very small team, so I got to learn a lot. And similarly at LinkedIn, I met a very interesting group of people, which led me to my next career choice also at Salesforce. So I think I've just been lucky enough to be at the right place at the right time. I haven't done a lot of strategizing.
What's been important to you when you're thinking about making these moves? Just the people that you've run into, or the problem?
Yeah, I think people has been one of the biggest draws for me in choosing the place to work at. And I didn't realize that initially. Like when I first made my, when I first was deciding right out of grad school, I was choosing between Facebook and Microsoft, and I thought, well, at Microsoft I'll get to do more research probably, so I decided to go with Microsoft. But I think every decision after that has been more based on the people who I'll be working with, because I realized how important that is.
When you made that first decision, why? Because you'll do more research, or what was the job offer at Facebook?
It was a generic software engineering position, and at Microsoft it was going to be more a research engineer, it was called at the time, because the term data science didn't yet exist. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's...
And you felt the problems would be more interesting, or that?
Yeah, I thought there would be more, you know, I'd probably be publishing more. I think when you're fresh out of a PhD, you're still in that mindset. You want to keep your ties to academia. Mm-hmm. So I think that influenced that decision.
What about you, Alexandra?
I tend to agonize a lot about career choices and what should I do next and so forth. But one thing that helped me was that my PhD advisor said, Ashish Goel said that there's always going to be more jobs that need smart, knowledgeable, hardworking people than there's going to be smart, knowledgeable, hardworking people. So maybe it's not such a big deal when you're deciding between one or the other. You can just go with your gut and instinct and intuition.
What has been your, what has affected your intuition in that? What was some of the, think of a moment when you were making a choice.
So one moment when I was making a choice was when I was an intern at Facebook in 2007. This was their first internship program, and I was in my second year of the PhD studies, and I got an offer to join them full time. Mm-hmm. And so I was facing this decision between maybe making a lot of money nobody could foresee then, or at least I couldn't foresee then. Right. How much it would be, I knew it would be a lot, and kind of pursuing the more scientific side and following that path. And at that moment, I felt that, well, if I don't go into don't complete my PhD now, maybe I will never do it. And so that was the driving factor, that I want to be a scientist. I want to understand some problem deeper. Mm-hmm. So that's the choice I made based on the intuition.
Do you feel good about that?
Yes, I feel very good about that.
Mm-hmm. You know, one time I was with Sergey Brin's mother, and I said, "Oh, you must be proud of your son." She's a physicist, I think. Some hugely impressive resume she has. And I said, "So you're proud of your son?" And she said, "He didn't finish his PhD. My husband and I are very disappointed." And I said, "I hope founding Google and making billions was made up for it just a tiny bit." And she's like, no. I just was thinking of that, sorry.
So for me, when I left my academic position, I'd always thought I was going to be an academic. I was a mathematician. I knew nothing about industry. I didn't know how to code. But it just, there's this potential to do something different. I mean, I get bored. That's one of the things that drives me, is that I get bored. Not terrible, but I just think there must be more than this. And so there was giving up tenure, and I'm so happy that I did that, because as you say, and as Ashish said to you, there are always going to be more jobs. I mean, it's not like I feel like I'm less employable. I'm certainly more employable. And I do strategize a little bit, but I follow where the science takes me and where the impact takes me. And I do worry a little bit as I get older that I might be getting a little more risk averse, because you have more, right? And so there's maybe a little bit more to lose. But then I keep thinking, if I stay where I am, I'm like guaranteed to not really do more. And so one of the things that I've learned is just to take those risks. And also to not be driven by money. I mean, I know Sergei's father, and I understand these Russians who think that, their kids should get PhDs.
These Russians.
These Russians, who are great. I mean, they're the greatest scholars. They really are. But I think one certainly shouldn't make a decision solely based on money, because in the end, it's not going to keep you going day to day. So, I mean, if you're going to Facebook because you really want to be there and you really want to have an impact, that's one thing. So I just think the big thing is to take risks. And I know sometimes women tend to feel that they have to be more highly qualified to do something. I mean, it's not universal by any means, but there are studies that certainly show, and I saw it when I was a professor. I mean, I would say to a woman, you should really go to grad school, and she'd say, no, I'm not good enough, and she'd be like, top of my class with 250 students, what does that mean? And so I think that you shouldn't let, your fear about your own abilities, or a fear that you might be an imposter or something, have any bearing on the kinds of decisions that you make. You should just take that part of your brain and say, thank you for sharing, and just put it aside. Seriously, just put it aside. It's not, we all have that part of our brain, and if I listened to that part of my brain, I would have had a very boring life.
So let's talk a little bit about, you brought up the issue of women's issues, and it's been a big topic in Silicon Valley lately on lots of different issues, all over the gamut right now. This week it's online harassment related to South by Southwest and other things. Has that impacted any of you in any way? Have you had any kind of, do you find that to be as big an issue as it's being made out to be, or is it not to you?
The harassment
No,
issue?
not the harassment. No, the harassment issue. The harassment issue is big. I'm sorry, the harassment issue is enormous. But in gender, the diversity issue in tech, I want to touch on it. It'd be hard not to touch on the issue when you're thinking of your career. Has it impacted your career in a way? Start with you, Shubha.
Not really, but one of my colleagues did notice that in my previous, one of my previous teams, data science teams, nearly all of the women, except maybe one or two, had PhDs, and nearly none of the men, except one or two, had them. And one of our hypotheses was exactly what Jennifer said, which is that women tend to feel the need to be overqualified for a position before they apply for it, whereas men are more willing to go out on a limb. And so maybe, if this is true, it was just a hypothesis, and women should be more aware of these tendencies and try to put them aside when they...
So get less PhDs. No, I'm kidding. Just fake it till you make it. I think that's what that's called. Anybody else?
I think fact finding is very important in terms of about yourself and about the situation than just your image or your hypothesis about what's going on. I think develop a very good sense about your skill set and who you are, and use a good friend, network of people who can be very open with you and give you feedback. I think that's the first step. I mean, an older woman, I think we have half of the population, are very different, right? And it's the important thing to find out what are your strengths and what's your weakness, and in a very objective way, then either too high or too low. And also find out what the job really needs, instead of you think it needs a lot more than you. It's like have very useful factual information. I think the first step to do anything. And I don't want to generalize, but the culture, and also sometimes I think, at least the culture, both Asian and woman, it's a culture, it's a contract that you tend to take the humble approach. And if everybody understands your culture, they know you're being humble, and they actually don't think. This is communication like code. It's different. When you say it's just because it's the right thing to say, and people actually don't believe you, actually don't believe in yourself, right? But in another culture, people will take it seriously and think that you're not confident. So I think that's important to know that in certain circumstances, depends on the receiver, you want to make sure you're not sending the wrong information. and you know the code book the receiver is using, so you pitch your information in the right, like, faithful way. Then you use your culture, and then the interpreter is interpreting with another code book. And tend to be, for women, tend to be kind of like underselling yourself, just because the two cultures are different. So I think it's understanding a situation is extremely important about what you have and what the other person might perceive you.
I think that's a really important point. There's a woman who came to me because she hadn't done well in an interview, and
She thought she hadn't.
No,
She hadn't.
I don't think she thought she had, but she wanted to know why, because on paper she was highly qualified and she hadn't done well, and she just wanted feedback, which was great. And I said to her, well, when I asked you what you wanted to accomplish in the next 5 to 10 years, you took what you've done today and you added epsilon to it, and you told me that's what you wanted to accomplish. And probably you thought it would seem arrogant if you said much more than that. But she did this with everybody to whom she spoke, and everyone said, oh my God, she's not very ambitious, she doesn't have a vision. And I said, now just imagine a guy who had all of your accomplishments. What would he say he could achieve in 5 to 10 years? Just kind of channel that. Just forget your humbleness and forget your fear that you might not accomplish this. And just imagine that you're somebody who is confident, a guy or a woman who appears confident, and just go with that. And this woman later came back and told me that it was great advice that she did that. And so this is exactly the point. She was toning it down. She didn't want to appear arrogant. She didn't want somebody to say, oh, you think you can accomplish that? Well, no way. And she really sold herself short. And when I kind of gave her permission to say what she'd like to achieve, then she said it. And of course, it was incredible. So, and she got
Unless
the
she
next
happens
job.
to be shy and doesn't want to do that.
Well, but
doesn't
you
want
have to learn. I mean, this is one of the problems. You want to be shy, you don't want to do that. Well, and I'd rather like sleep all day and stay up all night. But in this world that I live in, people aren't going to want to give me a job if I sleep all day and stay up all night. And there are certain things.
No, my only point is, if aggression is the rule, not everyone wants to be aggressive. Now, I happen to be extraordinarily aggressive, and I like it. And obnoxious also. So that works for me. But I think about that all the time, is what has to change in any culture, if that's what has to be the rule.
But I think to start off, you have to become a little more. I mean, people wouldn't imagine that I wasn't aggressive when I was younger, but I remember going to graduate school and seeing all the professors being really aggressive, which they are in physics. They attack each other, and I said to my now ex-husband, there's no way I can be a physicist. And he said, oh, you can learn. And I think anybody who knows me sees that I learned. I'm as aggressive as you are. So, I learned.
I think
or at least I appear that way.
I wasn't going right to asshole, but yes, okay, I got that. Alexandra?
So my view is, up until very recently, has been that being a minority and being a woman in male-dominated field is actually an advantage.
Okay.
In high school, when I was a girl interested in math and everybody else was a guy, it was, oh, I get to meet and impress all the smartest, coolest guy. Isn't that cool? And in college and then in graduate school, the view was, again, that maybe I can bring some problem formulations to the table that guys just wouldn't notice. So I always viewed it as an advantage to being a minority and being different than the group. Now I'm recently a new parent, so I'm looking for ways of how to say that it's still an advantage. But hopefully I'll figure that out.
So we're going to get to questions in a second, but let's talk a little bit, last question. One of the things that you would have done when you're thinking about your career paths, if you were to do a very different one now, if you were starting off, is there an area you would go into now that in a change? Is there some unusual thing, if you could just wave a wand, start again, what is most exciting to you besides what you're doing? Vin?
I kind of end up in neuroscience anyway. I think I would be doing neuroscience. Okay. Maybe starting from undergraduate and have a much broader education than I had. I had my education in China was math. Right, nothing else. And it was great foundation, but the education was very narrow. So I've been doing different research to, I think, make up for my general education.
I think I would join a startup because in my experience, even working in larger companies, the most fun I've had and the most I've learned is when I've been in smaller teams that are starting up stuff from scratch. And it's just the amount of learning you can have in those kinds of situations is just huge compared to if you're working as part of a larger team and have a very specialized role. So I think my very first job out of my PhD, I should have joined a startup.
You know, there's some startups in Silicon Valley you can join.
Yeah.
I've heard about it. Alexandra?
I think I'm happy where I am.
No complaints?
No complaints.
I feel like I keep changing what I'm doing anyway. I mean, I was a biology undergraduate, then I was a physics graduate student, then I was a professor of mathematics, then I ran a computer science group, then I put together an economics group.
I thought you were going to start, then I opened a coffee store in Seattle.
Right, then I opened a coffee store. But the point is, I don't think that you have to do one thing your entire life. I really, really don't. I mean, that doesn't mean I sound like a complete dilettante, and I'm not a complete dilettante in that, I spend 5 to 10 years doing one thing and actually accomplishing something, and then you get old and you can have done a lot of things. But well, first of all, when I do talk to young people now, I tell them they should do bioinformatics if they're not sure, because I think that's a way of helping the world, and it's huge, and there's all this data, and it's incredible. But like you've been, I finally come all the way around, and I'm doing bioinformatics again. And I think that being in this data science space, this technology space, you should have a good enough grounding that you leave yourself open to the fact that the world is going to change during your career. And you can change with it. There's nothing to say that you're this today, and that's what you have to be when you retire. I mean, that's horrible, right? So just leave yourself open to it.
So I'm going to be a physicist. So no, are you kidding? Questions, please, from the audience? Back there? Right here? We'll try to get to as many as possible. About 10 minutes. All right. Okay, let's start over here, and then we'll get to you.
I have 2 questions. The first one is about the whole aggressive behavior thing that you brought up. I recently read a study that said that the behaviors that get you to leadership aren't the sort of behaviors that actually let you do a good job. So humility, accepting that you're wrong, things like that, which women are constantly told to not exhibit, to be overly confident, and all of those things that are highly incentivized when you're working either in academia or industry. And we keep passing on this message to everyone: you got to be more aggressive, you got to talk more, you got to speak up, and isn't it time to take a step back and think about what kind of a message we're giving, and if we should reevaluate, regroup?
I think that's a really good point. Anybody?
So at least to this point in my life, I felt I have changed enough, even I refuse to change. And I think it's a man's turn to change. I mean, one thing I was in academia is really try to be accepted by the academy, but at the same time keep who I was or who I am. I'm sure I compromise. And now definitely I start talking to my male students for them to champion for women. So definitely I'm to a point that I think these are 2 different cultures. I try not to put values which is one better or worse, but I think the message has to keep being woman change. Because I can be aggressive, but it just takes a lot more out of me, it takes a lot more energy out of me to do that behavior which I'm not familiar with. So I have finite energy. Then it takes away from my scientific creativity when I have to do that. So I just think it's time for males to change.
Yeah.
That would be nice, but you see, Ben has already made it. So I'm sorry, I don't want you to tell them that they shouldn't speak up for themselves.
No, they
because
do.
somebody might not notice that they're great. People know you're great. And so it is important, I think, to push yourself. Yeah, you don't want to go like totally asshole. Okay, you don't want to go to, I'm not going to admit that I'm wrong. You don't want to go, but, and another thing is, how do you manage up versus managing down? I think almost everybody who works for me, I'm really compassionate. I really love them. I feel like they're my children. I mean, I'm very hard on them, but I really, really love them, and I think they will tell you that. I don't manage up nearly as well. I'm probably, which is like not a great strategy for making it, but whatever. I mean, I don't think you have to treat everybody in the same way, and I don't think that you have to not admit you're wrong or be harsh to the people you're leading. I think you can lead by inspiration, and yet when you have to deal with peers or up, you maybe are a little more aggressive and you put on this thing which takes some energy out of you, but you survive to lead another day.
Okay, we're going to get to, sorry, but it's just, if you don't mind, it's just there's a few people wanting to ask questions. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Can you come up to, go ahead if you want to.
The other thing was about harassment. So, it's like, it's a little surprising for me that people who've been in the industry for like 20, 30 years don't have any stories about harassment, because I've been in the industry like 5 years and I have stories on stories on stories. And so while it's on the one side really heartening to know that this kind of thing, like it kind of gives me this picture that maybe the only people who get all the way to the top are people who haven't been touched by any sort of a thing, or like the media likes to project.
You don't see our scars? They're here. They're beautiful, actually. No. Our scars are really beautiful.
No, I would agree. That's why I was asking the question. I was surprised too, because I think everybody, it's a really deep and problematic issue, And I think women tend not to talk even enough about it, as much as men think we talk too much about it.
Hi. So you've been giving some great advice to young graduates, and we're here at a conference about data science. So I wanted to ask the panel, how future-proof is the job of the data scientist? In particular, 2 weeks ago, MIT released results of a study saying that they'd created a data scientist machine that was able to produce models that could predict results better than 2/3 of teams competing in a data science competition. So should young graduates enter into data science? Is my question.
Yes, we're all going to be replaced. Someone take that very quick, and then we want to get to, when's the next, we have one more question, 2 more questions. Where was one?
Well, I guess there's a huge element of art to practicing data science correctly. And I don't think that that's replaceable with any sort of a machine. There's a lot of judgment and intuition that people develop over experience on knowing what are the right questions to ask of the data. And that's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. Yeah.
Anybody else?
I see this like you have the human brain leading the way, and there's certain very well-defined tasks can be automated, and then the human should move to the next frontier. So I see that it's really humans working with machines at the same time. It depends on the preparation, and then sometimes machine might do better, right? For chess playing, right, we know that machine can do better. But for other tasks, especially very undefined new territories, I don't think and I don't hope that ever we're going to lose that to machines.
Anybody else? Oh, we're going to have one more question. Oh, sorry. One more question, quickly.
Hi. So I think it was Ben Yu that said the writing on the wall was very clear earlier. So my question was, how do you know when you're on a project or a job and it's like, okay, this is like time to abandon this, even if it doesn't seem from the outside like a good idea?
Well, that's where the art comes in. It's a judgment call, and you do. I think if you have people you trust and who have a different view, you can talk to the people who get some more objective view than you. But sometimes just risk. You have to make a decision and you have to jump, and it's okay if you fail. You just get up and continue.
We're data scientists. There is no right answer. There is no, we're supposed to go here or we're supposed to go there. There's a probability distribution. And I'm really serious.
A math joke.
And there is
I love a math
life.
joke.
No, it's not a joke. I mean,
No, but it is.
it's not a
That
joke.
was a good math joke. Come on, take it.
No, but I'm serious. I view my life that way. I view my life as, I'm sorry, but I'm a geek
I got it.
too. I'm not a comedian, I'm a geek.
You still made a good joke.
And I view my life as a probability distribution, and I'm kind of like, let me just go where it's more probable that it's going to be productive and it's going to be fun and I'm going to be impactful, and I could be unlucky, and over a lifetime I will be unlucky. You know, but I recalculate, you know, I reset my priors all the time on the basis of my experience, and then I just go with it. You know, and then I just do the right thing given my updated priors. Does that make sense?
Excellent.
And you learn a lot when you fail too.
So we're going to finish up, but there's one characteristic that you have you think is your strongest characteristic that's been your strongest characteristic to make you successful. What would it be? What was the single one?
I think
one word.
Persistency.
Persistency.
Yeah, my ability to persevere, yeah.
Diversity of interests.
I would go with that too. Diversity of interests, bringing different things together. I love bringing different things together.
Great. On that note, thank you very much to the panel.
Thank you.